Hey everyone, today is the fourth video for getting a 2GR running in this Toyota MR2. The big thing we're going to be covering is plumbing, so the main cooling plumbing, the heater core plumbing, the fuel plumbing, and the air intake plumbing. And we also have to do one minor electrical tweak I forgot in the electrical video to disable the 2-speed fuel pump. And by the end of the video, the engine will be running. Though it will not be moving under its own power, there's a bunch of brake and suspension work to do yet. And a quick announcement before we get in there. This bracket's now available, which means you don't need to machine the right side axle stub before you put it in there. This works with the LSD as well as the open differential. As long as you have the correct stub for your application, you're good to go. All right, let's get in there. All right, first thing, let's get the starter in there. All right, let's get the electrical. And now we want to get the water neck on there. Don't forget new seals for this. And the 3-pin sensor that I'm going to be using for this one, and a copper crush washer. And the oil cooler lines, if you have them. All right. Next, we'll get the left side hose here. This is Gates 22306. It's not quite perfect. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I wasn't able to go search for a better one. So there's 4 inches or 100 millimeters added there. And the location of the bend, that extra bend in there goes closer to the bottom of the car. All right, let me go underneath and hook that up. And then for the right side hose, we're going to use Daco 21701, and we're going to trim it. So you've got the angle here, and then you can see it has a slight kick here, and right before this turn here is where you're going to cut it. And then the protective sleeve is actually not needed there. So we're going to take that off, and we're actually going to reuse that on the side here in a bit. All right, let's see how good of an angle I can get you guys on there. I'm actually going to want to trim. I'm going to trim about 3/4 of an inch off of that. Since I'm trimming it anyways, I'll just make that easier to take off. Next, we want to get the fuel line, but before we get the fuel line, we need fuel injectors to be able to hook the fuel line to. Now, personally, I like reusing this connector, so we're going to carefully remove the current hose that's on it. Now, the trick is to make sure you didn't nick it, especially right at the seal here. I did touch that, which is not the end of the world. I'm actually just going to trim the end up a little bit. There you go. So we're going to run 5/16 hose. It's a nice tight fit. Use a proper fuel injection clamp. And that's not going anywhere. Now, the nice thing about this clip is it'll go on, and you can actually push the buttons and it'll come back off. There's some aftermarket ones that'll fit on here, but because of this second ring right here, you'll never be able to get them off. There you go. Pretty happy with that routing. And then this is the Earl's Flame Guard stuff. It helps protect the fuel line from heat, but also from abrasion. So it's just a good idea. And then, since we use the factory coupler here, not only does it fit nicely, but we get to use the factory secondary lock. Yeah, looks like we're going to have to cut this last little bit off here. And there you go. And that's fuel taken care of. Now, this one gets forgotten by a lot of people. This is the crankcase ventilation. This needs to go on before the intake. Oh. Well, that's a problem. Well, to make sure I don't forget about this later, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. I don't have another one right now, and I think there's a good chance it'll reach. So, worst case scenario, I got to take the intake back off, but we're going to take it off for now. All right, let's get the upper intake manifold on there. And on this, the gaskets are reusable, but they do fall out easily, so make sure that all 3 gaskets are there. They just come off real easy. And drop it on. Now, the crankcase ventilation, the purge valve, and a plug on this one. Now we're going to get the brake booster line. This is vacuum. It doesn't really need a hose clamp, but the fit is not perfect, so I'm putting a hose clamp on. Next, we do the throttle body. And make sure your gasket's in. And plug it in. Now, this first coupler is actually a little tricky to put on because this opening is actually a smidge over 3 inches. And yes, constant tension clamps are really excessive for a naturally aspirated intake application, but it's what I have sitting around. It looks like that was made to hook up to the stock location, so we're going to need to extend that a little bit. There you go. You'll have to find some clamps for that. Let's see where this bracket that Alex provided goes. I think it goes down here. Oh, this bracket might not fit with the stock evap at the stock location. Well, that's interesting. For the sake of getting this running today, let's get the charcoal canister out. Oh, actually looks like we're going to need to find a replacement anyways. This one's rusted out. Oh. So it looks like we won't be able to use the bracket that Alex made. I'm not using the factory starter on this. This is actually out of a 2010 Camry. So it looks like it's interfering in that area. For the sake of today, we're just going to leave it floating and we will fix it in the next episode. Oh, and the mass airflow plug's not going to reach, so let's rotate the assembly. All right, that obviously needs brackets, but it's good for now. Now, the only plumbing there's left is the evap canister, and since we don't have that right now, we're actually going to unplug the electrical right here, and that'll stop the computer from opening this and creating a vacuum leak. There's probably going to be a fault code for it, though, but that's fine. All right, at this point, we're almost ready to start the engine, but I did remember after the electrical video that I forgot about the 2-speed fuel pump resistor. We actually need to tie 2 of these wires together so the fuel pump comes on at all. So let me undo this so I can get to that a bit more comfortably. All right, so if we look at this diagram, pin 5 and pin 3 is just getting it into high-speed mode. So Look at the pin layout, and we can see it's the bottom one here and the top right one. And then while we're here, the other thing we want to check is pull out your OBD2 reader and confirm that it can connect. We've got 0 faults. That's great. Then the other thing you want to do is grab your accelerator pedal and listen to your throttle body. That means our ECU is on and it's probably ready to start. So let me get you guys a different camera position. All right, it's a moment of truth. Let's get the first fire. And it's got a bit of fuel pressure, but there's still air in the line, so it's going to take a few seconds of cranking before it starts up. Also, if you're wondering why I haven't put any coolant in it yet, that's because I think coolant is nasty to get all over yourself, so I want to hear it fire before I put coolant in it. We're not going to run it for very long at all. So, let's give it a go. We got the OBD2 tool there in case we need to look at things. All right, I would have expected to start by now. So let's run through some diagnostic. Let's see if this thing gives us a crank RPM. Okay, what we're looking for is RPM. While we're cranking, let's see if we can see some numbers. Okay, so I can see some RPM, so all of those signals are fine. There's no faults, so if it's seeing RPM, the throttle is working. Oh, I turned it off again. So, we can hear the throttle working. There's RPM on there. So things should be working. I'm going to check, make sure we're getting fuel pressure. Okay, that was a puff of air that came up. So I suspect we're still, we just haven't cleared the air out of the lines yet. Going to short the fuel pump relay with the fuel line open until I see a bit of fuel. Well, I think I don't have enough fuel in the tank for it to pick up. All right, let's get some fuel up here. All right, works much better that way. Put this back so we get fuel pressure. All right, let's see if we get it on the second try. All right. She doesn't quite sound right, but I don't have any oxygen sensors right now, so I suspect that's the issue. Let's go take a look at our codes. Yeah, it hasn't stored a code yet for the oxygen sensors. But either way, I'm pretty confident that's the issue. So she starts. Let me install some oxygen sensors and we'll try again here in a minute. And it's the next day, and I'm glad I was able to sleep on it because I remembered I actually sabotaged myself. I had another 2GR that it was getting random multiple misfire codes, and because the ignition coils are known for going bad in this application, I just swapped them all with the ones from the other application, and I dropped the bad ones in here because I didn't want to leave the holes open for junk to be able to fall in. So, as you can see here, I'm just replacing all of them. And the other thing, since I'm feeling pretty confident about this, you can see here, I'm filling the coolant, and though I'm just filling it with water because I think there's a good chance this motor is going to come out to do the 2AR test fit. Nothing to do with the build, there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't necessarily need two 2GR powered MR2s, so this one might become the 2AR one. Either way, I don't know. But at this point, we've got this thing, and you can see the coolant temperature is 68 degrees. So we're going to let this thing run up and get up to temperature and see if the misfire is gone. All right, so we're more or less up to temperature. Our mist is gone, so. All right, well, misfire is gone. If you heard a little bit in the background that sounded like a misfire, keep in mind the O2 ports are still open on this thing. In the current situation, there's no way I can get O2 sensors by today. I'll have them at the end of the week, and I'll be able to do some testing then. Currently, it's only throwing 2 faults, and that's for both primary oxygen sensors, and I expect that to go away when I actually plug some in. The coolant temperature gauge works on the dash, as well as the check engine light. I can see it blinking. The only part of the dash that doesn't work yet is the tachometer, and that's because we haven't covered that yet, and that'll be in the next video. And the next video will just be a couple last things to button up: the tachometer, the accelerator pedal inside the cabin, and the assembly of the axles. But at this point, essentially, everything that you need to know that's special about putting a 2GR in here has been covered. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will do my best to address them all. But enjoy your swap. So, everyone, have a great day. We'll see you next time.